Welcome to this presentation. My name is Thomas Weikert and I am a resident at the Department of Radiology at the University Hospital Basel, Switzerland. In the next 10 minutes we will talk about the requirements of successful machine learning projects in radiology. And these thoughts are actually part of a multi-society consensus statement that was initiated by the European Society of Cardiovascular Radiology, together with many other societies, including SMRA. So let's start. This slide provides you with an overview of the societies that are involved in the consensus statement, which covers a wide range of aspects of machine learning in radiology with a focus on cardiovascular imaging. This presentation, of course, can only cover a small part of that, and the statement itself is in the final steps of the publication process, so we are very confident that it will become available later this year. I want to highlight the contribution of two persons, Jens Bremerich, who initiated this project, and Tim Leiner, who is the senior author and with whom I had a lot of productive discussions on this topic. The two initial questions of this short presentation are: first, who does it take to make machine learning algorithm development and implementation in radiology a success? And second, what are quality criteria for designing and reporting machine learning studies in radiology? These two questions directly translate to our two learning objectives for today. First, to understand basic requirements for successful development of machine learning projects in radiology with respect to human resources and expertise. And second, to get familiar with the checklist for quality assessment of machine learning studies in radiology. And this is useful both for researchers who want to write a paper in the field of machine learning, but also for those who want to critically appraise a paper on machine learning in radiology. This might seem obvious to some, but in our opinion, this is still a very important statement. Machine learning projects in radiology should involve experts with different professional backgrounds, mainly, of course, medical experts and machine learning experts, but at later stages you will also need expertise in user interface design, regulatory matters, and other fields. So machine learning in radiology is always a team sport. Different stages of machine learning projects in radiology require cooperation of different experts. Therefore, we propose these four steps of a machine learning project. First, identification of a clinically relevant problem solvable by machine learning techniques. Second, algorithm development. Third, algorithm evaluation. And fourth, translation into clinical practice. At the beginning of such a project, you need clinical domain knowledge to identify a question that is clinically relevant. And you also need expertise in algorithm development. And again, while this might seem self-evident, we still can observe a lot of projects conducted by computer scientists alone who spend months to solve problems that are not clinically relevant in the end. And on the other hand, also radiologists lacking knowledge in machine learning and algorithm development. So we would really recommend to establish a close cooperation from the start. It's also a good idea to involve patient advocates to identify patients' wishes and ethicists to identify ethical implementations of the project right at the beginning. For algorithm development, again, a close cooperation between the clinical expert and the machine learning expert is crucial. In the predominant case of supervised learning, this starts with obtaining ground truth. It's really important to keep in mind that the quantity and quality of the ground truth limit the performance of the algorithm. Therefore, the quality and quantity you need will depend on the performance that you expect from the algorithm in the end. Also, it's good to consult with your local ethics committee or an ethicist, because you will probably want to exchange medical data for external validation, and therefore you need to de-identify, of course, all cases, which in radiology also means that you have to erase certain DICOM tags with private information. For the third step, algorithm performance evaluation, you will most likely want to involve a statistician, because besides quite simple concepts of performance evaluation like sensitivity, specificity, false positives, false negatives, true positives, true negatives, you have a very wide range of other measures like the dissimilarity scores or ROC curves, the F1 score, and you really want to make sure that you pick the most adequate method. And we also highly recommend that the clinical expert checks the data visually, especially when you are working in the field of detection and segmentation. It's really important that you check what the algorithm actually found and do not only analyze the numbers, which can lead to false conclusions. Translation into clinical practice. This step is, in our opinion, at least as challenging as all steps before. And this is probably because expertise is required that is very rarely covered by clinical experts and machine learning experts. And that is, for example, expertise in user interface design, in legal issues, but also you have to make sure that your algorithm is compatible with the hospital IT infrastructure. And as we all know, the structure is subject to change over time and also geography. So this is really very, very complicated, and you have to push very hard to get algorithms into the clinical practice. In our opinion, it is the gold standard to integrate with the primary clinical systems, that is ResPAC systems, because this makes sure that the radiologists will actually use these tools and they also integrate into the clinical workflows. And with this slide, the second part of the presentation starts, which is on quality assessment of machine learning studies in radiology. And we propose 11 recommended items for designing and reporting machine learning studies in radiology. We did that because we think that studies in machine learning should be held to the same quality standards as other studies. And you all know frameworks like SPIRIT for clinical trials. And at the moment there are efforts underway to develop specific versions of these frameworks for machine learning. In the meanwhile, we thought that it's a good idea to provide some guidance with these 11 recommended items. And I want to quickly walk you through these items now. It starts with a clear description of the clinical problem and the rationale of the study, also taking into account existing approaches and how they fall short. And there should be specific information provided on the patient population for which the algorithm is developed. Second, the choice of the machine learning approach should be clearly motivated and explained. You should also discuss the problem of overfitting and how it's mitigated. And technical details should be provided on the algorithm, like hyperparameter settings. It's not enough to just say that a deep convolutional neural network was used. In contrast to guidelines for clinical studies, there is currently no agreement on how sample sizes should be calculated in machine learning studies. However, a study should include a discussion on the motivation for the sample that was used for algorithm development. Researchers need to specify how the general dataset was split into training, validation, and testing dataset. And there should also be a comment on how it was made sure that the testing dataset is completely independent of the other datasets. A key consideration in machine learning is the standard of reference or ground truth, and it should be specified how the labels were defined and who actually labeled this data. There also needs to be a comment on inter-observer variability and how this issue was solved. Studies contingency tables with true positives, true negatives, false positives, and false negatives should be provided at a pre-specified classifier threshold. You should always be suspicious if only one or two simpler measures like accuracy or specificity and sensitivity are reported. There should always be a comment on whether the results are explainable or not, and it's also worth to put in some thoughts into the reasons of false positive findings. Let me explain you why in a concrete example. If you have an algorithm that is designed to detect pulmonary embolism and you know that most of the false positives are caused by the detection of pulmonary veins, then you can actually develop a segmentation algorithm for pulmonary veins, stack the two algorithms, and then you will get rid of most of the false positive findings. Authors should shortly comment on whether the results can be applied in a clinical setting or not, and if not, then they should also maybe mention some problems on the way and point to some possible solutions. It's also important to comment on performance reproducibility in other settings, because most of the algorithms are developed on local convenience samples nowadays, and the gold standard would be external validation. But you always need to comment on that. Whereas feasibility studies at the beginning can be confined to pure evaluation of diagnostic performance, at later stages it's also important to look at evidence for impact on patients' outcomes, and I think this will become more and more important over the next years. And the last item is the code of the machine learning algorithm available. So authors should point out if, and if yes, where exactly the code can be found. Should just be a direct link provided. If the code is not available, then they really need to specifically state why this is the case. Availability is not only important for replication of results, but also for the research community. Then you can just download the code of another group and further develop it. So that's a very important point. This is the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening. We have rushed through only some points of the consensus statement on machine learning in cardiovascular radiology, which will of course contain much more. There will be an in-depth definition of the items of the checklist, which will then also be applied to a concrete scientific article. We provide lists with current software and hardware for machine learning in radiology, discuss opportunities and challenges, and also provide a literature review of current application of machine learning in cardiovascular radiology. As I said, we are confident that the paper will occur later this year, and yeah, we hope you will download and read it. Thank you and bye bye.